true joy to introduce Andrew Tsai, who's the founder of Chalkstream Capital, managing director at PDT Partners. He'll be in conversation with Ross Stevens. Ross is the founder of Stoneridge and the executive chairman of NYDIGE, and their talk is entitled "The Beauty of Bitcoin." And I think it's going to be really thought-provoking and a great way to end what I think has been a just really productive 2 days. So, Andrew and Ross, I want to say sincere thanks to spending this time with us today and lending your time and insights to our efforts here to raise money on behalf of our partner charities and stand up for children's education. So with that, Andrew, I'll turn it over to you. The floor is yours. And again, thanks for doing this.
What an honor to be here today and for such a great cause. And it's nice to be here in person with you.
Yes.
And hopefully that's the beginning of many more times. It's a beautiful day here in New York City. I can't imagine a better way. We're honored to end this conference. I'd like to welcome Ross Stevens, who's the founder and CEO of Stoneridge Holdings Group, which manages more than $20 billion in alternatives investments. The reason we're here today, in large part, is back in 2015, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys started accumulating Bitcoin personally. And you couldn't find a custody agent that you felt was institutional grade.
That's right.
So if you can't buy it, you build it. And that was the beginning of NYDIGE, New York Digital Investment Group, which Ross founded and is executive chairman. Today, NYDIGE is the largest full-service Bitcoin-only financial services and technology firm in the world. So quick background, Ross started at Goldman Sachs working with Fisher Black after earning your PhD from the University of Chicago. Your dissertation advisor, Nobel Prize winner Gene Fama. You have some lightweight mentors, I see. You did your undergrad at Wharton and is now giving back as chairman of the Stevens Center for Innovation in Finance at Wharton. And you founded this to champion research and collaboration between finance and technology. That theme is another part of the reason we're here today, the intersection of those two things. So most importantly, Ross is a dear friend and has been an important tour guide to me as I've navigated my own Bitcoin journey through his lens. So to call a spade, I am a super biased interviewer here today. But what I'd like to do today is push and probe around so many interesting questions I have for you. And I know these will resonate with the audience as well. And I want to encourage audience members to ask their questions. We're going to queue them up, and we're going to try and do as many as we possibly can towards the end.
Yep.
Bitcoin was mentioned in practically every session before this. So I'm really excited for our time between these two ferns together, Ross. So Ross, welcome.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.
So how did we get here? Tell me if this is right in terms of where we are today. So you've been a busy person this year in 2021. You just recently hired a CFO from a kind of a small hedge fund called Bridgewater. You announced the partnership with FIS to offer Bitcoin trading to hundreds of banks. You raised equity capital into NYDIG from some small institutions like Mass Mutual, Liberty Mutual, New York Life, Morgan Stanley. So not a lot going on this year. But I want to rewind back to Labor Day. And I've known you for 3 decades, and you are an extremely private person. I think when you started Stoneridge, you said no press policy. I remember that vividly. During COVID, a lot of us picked up new habits, hobbies. I binge watched Ted Lasso with my kids. But every time I called you, you were talking about a new book. You went deep into reading about philosophy, about cryptology, about the history of money. And you're very internal in that way. But post-Labor Day, I noticed something changed in you, and around Bitcoin and NYDIG specifically. So what happened, and why do you care so much about Bitcoin?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, you know me as well as anybody, and you could definitely notice more than just a shift. So I'll tell you about why I started to want to talk about Bitcoin, but you have to indulge me for a second just to tell you a little about why I said yes to talk at Dean's conference. And so let me just take us off script for a second and just give the audience a little bit of background on Dean. So I've been the dearest of friends with Dean since 7th grade. And the way that we met is Dean went to an elementary school through 6th, had 120 kids. I went to 1 through 6 that had 80 kids. We came together, 200 kids in 7th grade. As soon as we got there, there was a presidential election. And this kid named Tim from Dean's school ran for president, and I ran for president. Tim laid out his policies. I laid out my policies. It was very partisan. Okay, if you came from Tim's school, you liked his policies. If you came from my school, you liked my policies. Dean, however, said, Tim's got it all wrong. I like this guy Ross's policies. And he crossed party lines, very controversial at the time, crossed party lines to support me. That not only that, he became my campaign manager, campaigned ferociously, and shrunk what would have been an enormous gap in the election of 120 to 80 if everybody voted along party lines. The final result was 119 to 81. So I still got my ass beat pretty badly. I lost the election, but I gained a friend in the form of Dean Kernot, who I've had since 7th grade. So it's a pleasure to say yes to Dean at this event.
What a great trade.
What a great trade. Now, I've also said yes, as you point out, to talking about Bitcoin. And you're absolutely right. That time period from March 2020 to August 2020, it was not a great period for me. It was not a great period personally. It was not a great period professionally. The snow in my mental snow globe was shaking pretty mercilessly. The snow in our professional snow globe was as well. And really what was most getting to me, what was really having me down, it was a dark time, was thinking deeply about the profound unfairness of the fiat monetary system, the profound unfairness of the impact of well-intentioned central bank activities. Well-intentioned, but the results were profoundly unfair. The exacerbation, the explosion of wealth inequality was breathtaking. We haven't even seen anything yet. The explosion and exacerbation of business inequality, so favoring big companies over small companies, is breathtaking. As an individual, if you did not own assets going into 08, 09, the American dream got pretty far away.
You're left
sadly.
behind.
Yeah, you're left behind. But if you did not own assets going into March last year, the American dream is gone, man. It is a speck in the distance. And that's terrible. That's not us. That's not our country. We're the greatest country in the world. We've had enormous inflation in the American dream. We can define that as real estate and retirement as kind of two pillars of the American dream. When the Fed comes in and buys treasuries, or Fed comes in and buys RMBS, they're buying houses. So if you owned a house already, golf clap. But if you didn't, too bad. That's not fair. What's the main tool for retirement besides Social Security? It's a private version of Social Security, an income annuity. 20 years ago, for $1 million, you'd have about 10 to 120,000 a year in income. Now you might have 30 to 40,000 a year of income. There's been massive inflation in the American dream in the form of retirement. It's becoming are largely unaffordable. But the biggest shift that made me think about things differently in that March to August period is the impact of cash on people's portfolio, and particularly the disproportionate impact of cash on a poor person's portfolio versus a non-poor person's portfolio. So think about it. A poor person, somebody with $10,000 net worth, likely the percentage of their portfolio that is cash is 90, 95, 99, 100%. If they have a $5,000 net worth, it's probably 99, 100%. If they have a $1,000 net worth, it's probably 100%, of course, right? If they have $1 million net worth, maybe that cash percentage is 10 or 20 or 30 or 40, but not 90, not 95%. And the problem with that is cash is radically depreciating in value. Cash is no longer an asset. Cash is a liability. And the more the Fed prints, the more the non-cash portion of the wealthy person's portfolio inflates, the more the cash portion deflates. Now, that doesn't matter because they've got the non-cash portion. But the poor person, they only have the cash portion. So they're out of luck.
That's it.
And that is just a terrible, terrible result. Bitcoin has been called wealth insurance. Who needs insurance the most of any kind? It's the most vulnerable people. The most vulnerable people need the wealth insurance. I think it's absolutely correct. And so helping less well-off people have access to Bitcoin became like this very focused effort in my mind, and it manifests itself at NYDIG every day. Bitcoin is also life insurance, though, but it's not life insurance in the sense of a big payout if you die. It's more in the sense of a big payout while you live. But it's not a big payout in the formal sense of a big pot of fiat money. It's a payout in the sense of personal sovereignty. It's a payout in the form of freedom and dignity. And when you're poor and all you have is fiat, and that's a melting ice cube of value, you lose your dignity every single day the Fed prints. And that is not okay. The good news, though, is we finally have a monetary system governed by rules, not rulers. And it's open to all. So everybody gets to choose, which is great. You can stay on the fiat standard, in which a very small group of people get to produce unlimited new units of money, just not you. Or you can opt in to the Bitcoin standard, in which no one gets to do that, including you. You can decide which is more fair. So for me, Andrew, during this time period, thinking about these kinds of thoughts, the exacerbation of wealth inequality, the profound unfairness of central bank activities, even though they're well-intentioned, I saw the awesome power of Bitcoin. And you're right, since 2013, actually, we've been involved, since 2015 in a serious way. So it wasn't new. But I saw the awesome power of Bitcoin in a new light. And I just decided personally, it was totally a personal decision, I wanted to say non-zero words about it. So I gently lifted the no press policy at NYDIG. And I'd say I'm in the very early stages of finding my voice on the importance of Bitcoin.
So let's go to that letter, the 2020 Stone Ridge shareholder letter. So again, we've known each other forever. We work out weekly, we talk about everything. And despite that, when I read the letter, I was blown away. And I say this with as much objectivity as I can. This is, to me, the best investment letter I've ever read.
Thank you.
And in my prior role as an allocator, I read hundreds of letters a year, which meant thousands over my career, including Buffett, the top hedge fund, private equity guys, and this was profound. So if you haven't read it yet, I highly encourage you to Google it, absorb it. It's an amazing piece. I took 4 pages of notes when I read it, and many of those notes are outlining what we're going to talk about today. So when did you first realize that the impact of this letter was real on people?
Well, let me tell you how I write the letter. So I send myself notes all year, notwithstanding the fact that you're right, Stone Ridge since 2012, since it began, had a very strict no press policy, strong privacy policy. The one external facing thing I did do a year was write a shareholder letter. It wasn't necessarily public, but I wrote it and it certainly got around. And the way I write the letter every year, it's the same as I send myself notes kind of all year long, thoughts I'm thinking about. Most of it ends up on the cutting room floor. I go down to Costa Rica every year. I take 10 days. And for each of those 10 days, 10 to 15 hours a day, I write. At the end of those 10 days, I call it done. I click submit, and that's it. What was different this year, though, is at the end of that process, when I click submit, I turned off my phone, I turned off my computer, turned off my electronics. I went surfing, hung out with my family, just got completely off the grid.
You're done.
Right? So 3 days later, I turn on my phone, and as my teenage daughter would say, my phone is blowing up. It literally, it blew up. I didn't know. I knew all these people. What had happened was Jack Dorsey, somehow, I have no idea how, had gotten a hold of the shareholder letter and tweeted it out. Now, what's interesting about that is Jack has about 5 million more Twitter followers than me, and exactly 1 more Twitter account than me. So I have no social media. So that's when I knew something was going on.
I think it's funny because how often do you have to actually text screenshots of tweets to someone to inform them of tweets that are being circulated around the world?
It was pretty funny.
So has he asked you to set up a Twitter account? Has Jack reached out and said, "Come on, Ross, do me a good"?
He's doing fine without me on Twitter.
So one of the sections in that letter that really stuck with me is a section titled "What is Money?"
Mm-hmm.
And we spent our lives in the markets, traders, portfolio managers, managing money. And I always thought money was an existential question. You try to explain money to your kids, they kind of know you turn it in to buy things, but what is it? What is it backed by? How do you make it? You kind of just make it. So, but there's one line in there that was an epiphany to me. And the quote is, "Money is titled to human time." So can you elaborate on your decision on how you came to that definition?
Sure. Well, let me start kind of maybe building up to that. I think that first and foremost, money is technology. Money is technology. It is, and it always has been technology. And specifically, money is technology for taking our wealth today and doing our best to make that wealth available for consumption tomorrow. So virtually all of us Americans, the way we grew up, fortunately, but we made a sort of mental mistake. We assume there's a sharp line of distinction between what's a money and what's not, and that's false. Throughout history, various monies, plural, have always coexisted along a continuum of monetary soundness. Hard money, something that's going to keep its value. Soft money, something that's not. Subject to competitive network effects. So the reality is, money's just a good. It's just a good like any other good, except what makes money as a good unique is that we value money not for its own sake, like we do other goods. We value money not for its own sake, but solely for its prospective exchange utility, which is a fancy way of saying, can we take the money and trade it in the future for stuff we actually want? No one wants green little pieces of paper. You don't, and I don't. No one wants Bitcoin. What we want green little pieces of paper for, or Bitcoin for, is what those things can buy us in the future. An education, a vacation, a car, a boat, whatever. We don't want the money. We want what the money can do for us in the future. So with that as context, you're right. Money is also title to human time. Why? Because I know there's a lot of portfolio managers and traders here, and they think about trades they make every day. But the reality is the most important trades we make are the ones we make with our future selves. Whether we realize it or not, we all have a Darwinian propulsion, like that strong, towards holding the soundest money possible. And that Darwinian propulsion, apropos of the word Darwinian, it's as unstoppable as evolution, because instinctively, we don't need to do an optimization. We know our survival is at stake. Why is that true? Think about unsound money. So you work all day, you get your money, you store your labor in something unsound, meaning it doesn't keep its value. What happens? No food, no shelter, no mate, no reproduction. Think of the alternative. You work all day, your labor is stored in something that does keep its value, a vessel that is sound. Food, shelter, mate, reproduction.
Reproduction is kind of important.
At the end, reproduction is pretty important, right? Kind of. And it sort of follows the others. So in the same way that a stock certificate, for example, is titled to company capital, money is titled to human time. We each sacrifice our time for money. And the reason we do that is because we want to trade that time for the time sacrifices of others. So when the Fed creates $3 trillion of money in a matter of weeks by pushing a button, it consolidates the power to price and value human time. That is not okay. Humans are not supposed to have that kind of power over other humans. Time is all we have. Time is all we have. So when Powell says, for example, as a practical reaction to that, we're not even thinking of raising rates, which he said last June, which is a translation of we're not even thinking about stop the printing. At Stone Ridge, what we said to ourselves is, okay, we're not even thinking about not buying more Bitcoin. And we did. More Bitcoin last year than the previous 5 years combined. And we're on quite a big pace this year as well.
That's an amazing point. I don't think people would necessarily guess that. I think people would have guessed, oh, we bought a bunch of Bitcoin way back when no one knew about it and just held all the way through. But can you repeat that again? You bought more Bitcoin
in 2020 than the previous 5 years combined. And we're on a pace to buy even more this year. Why? Time. Bitcoin is our peaceful weapon of choice against central bank-driven time theft. Not on my watch. I'm not letting the central banks steal the time of my partners, my colleagues, and my clients. Absolutely not. Bitcoin's our peaceful weapon of choice.
Wow, that's it's deep and it's powerful, and as the title of this talk says, it's beautiful.
Well, it's also got incredible practical effects. I mean, adopting the Bitcoin standard as we did as a firm back in 2017, so we're dabbling, but then we went all in 2017. It's had profound effects on our company. If you think about that denominator of money, of fiat money, just never ending and expanding, that means necessarily that Bitcoin gets more and more valuable. Anything that's provably scarce. It's not unique to Bitcoin, but anything that's provably scarce, but Bitcoin gets more and more valuable. So things like compensation and rent and anything we want to purchase, acquisitions, everything's getting cheaper for us in Bitcoin. So company A in financial services, company B, one adopts the Bitcoin standard, one doesn't. Wait, now we're 4 years in, 5 years, 10 years in. The competitive dynamics are significant.
Yeah, hold that thought. I want to touch on corporations and Bitcoin in a bit. But
Okay.
before we do that, since this is a macro conference, I wanted to talk about salability across time. And
Sure.
specifically, what
Sure.
I'm talking about is gold, right? Inflation number, CPI number came out today. Inflation's all over the press. So help us understand Bitcoin and gold, how they coexist, how they're different.
Probably the best comparison for Bitcoin it is gold. And the reason is because if you think about the qualities and characteristics that make a money a good money, salability across time is certainly at or at the very top of the list, or right now, which basically means does it hold its value through time?
Yeah.
Does it get inflated? Talk about gold in a second, but let's start with silver, because the oldest fiat money in existence today is the British pound. It's about 371 years old. It's pretty old. And back then, 371 years ago, 1 British pound bought 1 pound of silver. Today, 1 pound of silver buys you 174 British pounds. A little bit of inflation. But the key here is to understand what changed and what did not change, okay? The silver, that did not change. 371 years ago, it weighed a pound. Today, it weighs a pound. 371 years ago, it had certain chemical properties. Today, it has those same chemical properties. The silver did not change. The fiat is what changed. It debased over 99%. So silver crushed fiat as a store of value. What about versus gold? Well, gold crushed silver, and for a very simple reason. The inflation of gold, or the printing of gold, the supply growth of gold, for the last 100+ years, as long as measurement goes back, gold supply has grown at about 1 to 2% a year. That's as much as we can get gold. That's it. And it's been very steady in this band of 1 to 2% a year. In contrast, silver's been up there 20 to 30% a year. So think about that compounding effect over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So gold has been a much better store of value than silver. Silver was obviously much better than fiat, as we talked about, compared to the British pound. Now, gold being very good, though, doesn't change the fact that the US going off the gold standard, probably the biggest own goal in the country's economic history. So gold's got some really good qualities, but it does have one acute flaw relative to Bitcoin. And this is kind of makes it DOA relative to Bitcoin. Its supply is not impervious to its demand. So what that means is, if hypothetically tonight gold went from not exactly this, but $2,000 an ounce to $100,000 an ounce, tomorrow morning, would the miners get to work early or late? Early. Would they stay late? Yes, they'd stay late. Would we be all melting down whatever gold we could find in our
wife's jewelry's gone?
It's gone. It's gone.
Gone.
It's
sorry.
And we'd probably be sending our applications in for gold mining jobs, and the gold supply would increase. It wouldn't skyrocket. Gold doesn't work that way, but it would increase, driving its price down. Bitcoin doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. Bitcoin supply, unlike gold, cannot be increased regardless of the level of demand. So if Bitcoin's at 55,000 and tonight it goes to 155,000 or 255,000, that's outrageous. It's not going to tonight. It will eventually, I think. What's going to happen tomorrow to Bitcoin supply versus what was expected? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The supply of Bitcoin, the new supply every year, the inflation of the amount that's printed, so to speak, is on an asymptotic journey to zero, predictably over time. It's already on sort of the planet about gold right now. And what's just mind-boggling about that is Bitcoin is the first store of value in human history whose supply is completely impervious to any amount of increased demand. There are no miners. There's lots of miners, but the miners working harder do not increase the supply of Bitcoin the way they increase the supply of gold. So the conclusion is that Bitcoin is better at being gold than gold. It's more saleable across time.
It's interesting. I'm picturing in one corner infinity, and the other corner limited supply.
That's right.
That's right. Meeting in the middle.
That's right.
So let's pivot a little bit to corporations.
Sure.
And we touched on it a little bit earlier. So you spoke with Michael Saylor at the MicroStrategy Bitcoin conference. I think it was in February. And there was a quote from there that really stuck with me. And I think you're referring to capital allocation and where Bitcoin sits within corporate balance sheets. And your quote was, "This is the most important decision in the next 10 years for any CEO."
Yeah.
And so I'd love to ask you to talk about that, but also I'd like to broaden it out to the people here at the audience today, right? So we're PMs, allocators, brokers, traders. Like, how should we think about that?
I think that a PM and allocator has exactly the same problem as a CEO, because a CEO is an allocator. CEO has two jobs: executive, that one's obvious; allocator, that one's more important. What you do with your company's assets, their reserves, both their liquid and their illiquid reserves. And what's changed, as I mentioned earlier, about the liquid reserves of a corporation is that cash is no longer an asset. It is a liability. It needs to be thought of that way. And if you don't view it that way, that is a decision. You're allowed to make that decision, but it's an active decision. And for companies like Stone Ridge and others that have adopted the Bitcoin standard versus companies in their industries that have not, the results are profound. They are profound. And part of the key is a shift in mindset. The shift in mindset is that Bitcoin is not volatile. Fiat is volatile. Bitcoin is the thing that's fixed. Fiat is the thing that's subject to the whims of human frailties, human decision-making, human good intentions, which tend to have unintended consequences.
So you're defining volatility not as standard deviation, how we normally think about it. You're thinking about, can the foundation just shift from underneath me due to no other rules that I've agreed to?
I'm also thinking about it in terms of standard deviation, because when we think about, people say Bitcoin is volatile. I understand how they think about it that way. I understand my view is in the 0.001%. So I'm not saying it's for everybody, I'm just saying it's mine. When they think about that, they think about, the fact that you need to pay for things still in fiat, and that is true. So when I say we've adopted the Bitcoin standard, 85 to 95%, you still got to pay salaries and rent and things in fiat. But you get to choose what's the unit of account. So you can decide that fiat is a unit of account and nothing about it is changing. It's by the money printing, and that Bitcoin's the thing that's volatile. Or you can just decide that Bitcoin is a unit of account and the fiat is that change. You can decide that a house is a unit of account. You can decide that anything is a unit of account. But because of the monetary properties of Bitcoin, it is much better suited, in my opinion, as a unit of account. It is not subject to the whims of politicians or central banks. Think of it this way, like Waze, right? We didn't used to have Waze in the world. Now we have Waze in the world. And if you're going for a trip and you have a choice of using Waze or asking your friend like what you should do, like on the telephone, you're going to use Waze, right? Imagine there's 20 million cars on the road in America right now, and you and I are trying to help direct traffic in Fresno, California, right? And we can say to our friend driving in Fresno, you could use Waze, or we've got kind of a video camera on you, and we're going to direct you. In fact, it's not just us; it's not the two of us. There's 10 other our friends.
Yeah,
12.
I've been there once.
Yeah, 12 central, 12 central bank presidents. And so we have like these 12 people. Maybe we have a video camera on Fresno, or you've got Waze with 20 million cars and real-time signals. What's going to give a better fidelity of price signals? It's the cars themselves. But that's only half the point. The 12 of us, you, me, and our 10 friends, the 12 central, we can only focus on Fresno. What about the whole rest of the country? It's not fair to them that we're only focusing on that one place. They need traffic direction too. So in a Waze-like manner, prices need that type of freedom. Prices need that type of Waze-like freedom so that we have accurate signals on which to base our decisions. So staying on the fiat standard is the equivalent of asking each of us and 10 of our friends to guide all of our driving decisions. That seems very volatile. Waze isn't perfect, but I'll take signals from the market any day over signals from 12 people, unelected or not. And so that's a motivation for thinking in Bitcoin. As a portfolio manager, if you are not long, you're short Bitcoin. And that's true for any asset, but it's especially true for an asset with such an asymmetric right tail. Like we can debate, is Bitcoin going to be a big deal in the future or not? But I don't think we can debate whether, if it is, it's going to have an enormous right tail. I don't think that's debatable. And I think the thing that shifted the most, if you are an allocator, is that Bitcoin is de-risked. That's really the thing that shifted. And if you ask me, why did we buy more Bitcoin last year than the 5 years before? It's simply and only because of that. It's been de-risked.
What's de-risked it?
What's been de-risked is the left tail of zero. Bitcoin going away. Bitcoin is not going away.
It's too entrenched. It's too involved.
In my talk with Michael Saylor, it was a true story. A couple weeks before that talk, I said, over kind of the 2015 to 2020 period, if a client asked me, what's the probability of Bitcoin going to zero? That was a legitimate, real conversation. If a client asked me that now, and I mentioned this with Michael Saylor, I'd say, what's the probability of Christianity going to zero? It's just not happening. The train has left the station, the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's not going to zero. So, statistics. You think about distribution with an enormously asymmetric right tail, this huge possible upside. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it could happen. And you chop off the left tail of zero, the mean explodes. The mean explodes. So not making a decision to adopt the Bitcoin standard is very active. And the point really is that whether you make the decision as a CEO or whether you make the decision as a portfolio manager actively, or you ignore it, therefore don't make it passively, you've made it. You've made it. And I think you've made it with very high consequence.
So let's talk. So part of NYDIG's mission is to help institutions get onto the Bitcoin standard,
Yes.
right? And you've had some big names follow you there. So why are they getting involved now? Like these seemingly large mainstream companies are getting active, and it's just starting, right? It's not by no means the majority, but why now? Like, what's resonating with them?
Well, I tell you, we're seeing uptake from kind of all spectrums of financial services, all spectrum of investors. But I think maybe the strangest pairing, the strangest bedfellows, and sort of the most active folks we're seeing are millennials and life insurers, not folks you normally kind of compare.
They don't hang usually.
But what do millennials and life insurers have in common? They have the longest fiat-denominated liabilities basically in the world. If you're a 30-year-old, your fiat-denominated liability, basically your retirement, is kind of a 40, 50 year, if you're lucky, 60-year duration asset. If you're a life insurer, you don't have a 60-year duration, but you might have a 30, 40-year duration portfolio. People don't have those kinds of durations. That's what they have in common. So isn't it interesting? Without comparing notes, without talking to each other,
right,
millennials and life insurers find themselves more and more adopting the Bitcoin standard. Bitcoin is known as the millennial savings account now. And more products will be denominated in Bitcoin that you'll see from insurers. In addition to adoption of Bitcoin, so in that sense, what we're really talking about is just buy it, right? Just own it, get off zero.
Yep.
What you will see over the next 12 to 24 months is nothing short of an explosion in Bitcoin-driven financial innovation in the banking sector, in the insurance sector, even in salaries. So I'll give you an example. You mentioned FIS, right? So you grew up in St. Louis. So
proud St. Louis.
Think about the big four banks: Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, BofA. Put them to the side. Think about Bank of St. Louis. I don't even know if it's a real place, but let's say there is Bank of St. Louis. It's got 6 branches. They don't have 200 people in the tech department. They might not have 200 employees in the whole bank. So they can't afford the same kind of technology app for mobile banking that Chase can. But FIS, which banks technology for 3,000 banks and 5,000 credit unions or so, they do have a 200, 300, 400 person tech department. They can build a world-class app and let the Bank of St. Louis just white label it, just reskin it. And so if you are a Bank of St. Louis customer, you've got an awesome mobile app. It says Bank of St. Louis on it. You're proud to be a Bank of St. Louis customer. Your dad was a Bank of St. Louis customer. Your grandfather was. That's your bank.
Feel safe, right?
Feel safe.
Rather than some random app I got to download.
Safe. And as popular and as much as Bitcoin's being adopted, we're still in the very, very early innings. And the biggest problem people have with it is they just don't necessarily feel safe. Can they trust the financial solution they're working for? So with FIS, we've partnered with them so that their core app will enable Bitcoin buy, sell, and hold, so that when you have your Bank of St. Louis app, you're like, oh man, I can buy Bitcoin on it.
Yeah.
I'm already AML KYC'd. I press a button, it goes into this one report. In addition, on your Bank of St. Louis credit card, which is just a white labeled credit card, to that, you can get cash rewards, you can get miles rewards, but you'll be able to get Bitcoin rewards.
Wow.
It's pretty cool.
So my friends in St. Louis, because they're going to ask me after this, like, when can I get this? Like, what's the timing on this?
Nothing's fast in banking. I would think you'll see the beginning baby steps of a rollout Q4, and really 2022 will be the year of bank after bank after bank enabling their customers to buy Bitcoin, to get Bitcoin rewards on their credit cards, and additionally to get interest in Bitcoin. Now that's meager, but it's non-zero. Another area where you're going to see an enormous innovation in financial services and insurance. And so take income annuities, that product I was talking about. You give the insurance company a bunch of money, you get a payment every month for life. What you'll be able to do is elect to get a portion of that payment in Bitcoin. You want to get 10% of your monthly payment in Bitcoin?
Wow.
You'll elect to be able to do that. A variable annuity, you'll be able to opt into a Bitcoin option. The dividend from a whole life policy, you'll be able to opt to have that compound in Bitcoin. Just the beginning. And salaries. To me, salaries are fascinating because just like yesterday, corporations had to offer 401ks and health insurance as table stakes. It went from should we or shouldn't we to I think we should to absolute table stakes. To be a competitive employer of choice. You have to. I believe tomorrow, I mean literally tomorrow, but in the future, the employers of choice will have to offer Bitcoin as a portion of salaries. Opt in, you don't have to do it. But employees will have to make it easy, not hard, to opt in to Bitcoin. A slider, 5%, 10%, 25% of your biweekly salary in Bitcoin. All of that is coming in the next 12 to 24 months. So another way of saying, you haven't seen nothing yet in terms of Bitcoin adoption.
That's amazing. But before I want to move on to central banks, but before I do, one little kind of quick behind the curtain kind of question. So these big institutions, how are these CEOs getting religion, right? Is there a millennial in the corner saying, excuse me, sir, I think we should consider this? Like, yeah, how is that? How are they getting there? Because these are some institutions that like aren't fast typically. Like, what is the common thread and how they've made that leap?
There isn't one. The common thread is there isn't a common thread. So it's everything from the millennial in the corner and the CEO doing it grudgingly because he realizes the economic opportunity. Banks are, take banks in particular, they're struggling right now with NII, non-interest income. It is like, water in the desert. It's incredibly valuable for banks. It's almost impossible to get. Bitcoin services offers them significant provable NII. So some CEOs have no religion about it, and it's just a commercial transaction, which is fine. Other CEOs absolutely have gone down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. They see it as a tool for financial inclusion, for economic empowerment, which is exactly how I see it. And they're driving their organizations forward. And that's not just CEOs. Just today, for example, the first ever IndyCar Bitcoin was announced.
Race car,
Indy 500. In the Indianapolis 500, there will be a Bitcoin car, first time ever. And you talk about the religion of CEOs about Bitcoin. So Ed Carpenter, legendary racer, he decided he was really sick of racing for potato chips and energy drinks and soft drinks and oil, motor oil. He wanted to race for human freedom. He wanted to race for human dignity. He wanted to race for Bitcoin. So he said, how about no sponsors? Let me see if I can raise money from the Bitcoin community.
Wow.
The money will go towards paying the cost of the car. Anything extra will go towards open source development for Bitcoin. That was announced today. Watch the Indianapolis 500. And in the category of you can't make this up, it's a movie, it's car 21.
Come on.
Bitcoin has 21 million. And it lines up next to the bank PNC car. So the decentral bank lines up next to a commercial bank.
Oh, boy.
So that's an example of an executive who got religion about Bitcoin.
Well, let's continue that thread of decentralization versus centralization. And Kevin Warsh was fascinating yesterday. Yeah. And one of the things that he talked about was the extremity of consensus on central bankers today, and how they're just all kind of in it, and they're infinity, right? So it feels like there's a lot of fear and opposition from central banks on Bitcoin, right? And so last week, the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey is quoted saying, "Buy them only if you're prepared to lose all your money." So how do you respond to that?
How do you respond to that? With humility, with empathy. I mean, we're all products of our backgrounds. We're all products of our education. We're all products of schools of thought that we followed. And if those schools of thought led us to success, it reinforces in our minds that those schools of thought are correct, even if they are not. So I respond with humility and with empathy. I don't agree with him. I mean, literally, I do agree with him. Crypto investors do risk losing all their money. I don't agree with him about Bitcoin. So actually, on its face, I actually agree with Andrew. The reality, though, is in a time of great transition, a beginner's mind is prized. And I think this is the thing that Kevin was referring to, essentially, in my words, not his, the lack of a beginner's mind.
Yeah.
I had an experience this past Saturday where the heads of 3 of the largest central banks in the world wanted to talk about US inflation and Bitcoin with me. And so, you could get a dustpan, so I'm not going to name drop, pick up all the names I drop here. But they wanted to talk about inflation. We spent 4 hours on it. And with all respect to the central bankers I spoke to over the weekend, I totally agree with Kevin. Unanimity, uniformity in thought. Again, well-intentioned, but the lack of open-mindedness was breathtaking. And we are in a time of great transition, and a beginner's mind is prized. Because a beginner's mind, it seeks out the why with the intention of discovery. It's not trying to defend a prior reality. It's not trying to defend a mental model that's been created. We're in a time of great transition. I say a lot of things, but we're in a time of great transition. So if I want to think about central banks, I can think about the central bank, but I can also think about the decentral bank. I call Bitcoin the decentral bank, which it is. The central bank has a dual mandate. The decentral bank also has a dual mandate. The central bank's dual mandate is price stability and full unemployment. The decentral bank, Bitcoin's dual mandate, is to be the ultimate risk-on asset and simultaneously the ultimate risk-off asset. How can that be? Well, it's the ultimate risk-on asset because as the money printer just goes brr, like the smoke is coming out of the machine. I don't mean just literally printing, but credit creation, which is really the same thing. Anything that is provably scarce, and we're seeing that in the inflation number today, but you could look at collectibles, you could look at lumber, you could look at tin, you could look at Bitcoin. It's hyperinflating. Or said differently, the US dollar, sadly, is in a hyperinflation against Bitcoin. It's not, what was the CPI reading, 4.7 or something like that, or 4.6? That's not the CPI against Bitcoin. The US dollar has depreciated 94% against Bitcoin since the beginning of 2019. So Bitcoin is the ultimate risk-on asset as the money printer goes burr. It's also simultaneously the ultimate risk-off asset because it does have the dual mandate, just like the central bank. It's the ultimate risk-off asset in very much the same way gold has been for centuries. When the stuff is hitting the fan and no one knows which way is up, you race back to something that is provably scarce. Now, we talked about earlier why Bitcoin is better than gold. It's the ultimate risk-off asset. You want to talk about risk-off, though, like real risk-off? You know, portfolio managers, allocators, all of us on this call, we think of risk-on, risk-off in the capital markets. You know where there's really risk-off right now? Is Venezuela. That's risk-off. Like, be a citizen in Venezuela, that's a risk-off life. Be a citizen in Turkey right now, that's a risk-off life. Be a citizen in Iran or Pakistan or Zimbabwe, that's a risk-off life. What does Bitcoin have to do with anything? Because in those places, increasingly, literally every single day, more and more people are storing their life force, their day's labor, in Bitcoin. There's an increasingly large underground economy in those countries denominated in Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is not just a store of value, it is a unit of account, it is a medium of exchange. It's how people are surviving versus not surviving. So you go to the dark places in the world where risk is off, survival is on, they're choosing Bitcoin.
It goes back to your earlier point of like the vessel of storage. They've actually seen their vessels of stuff be worthless.
They got it. They got it. They only have 70 once.
So let's talk about consensus versus non-consensus. And on the topic of central banks and reserve assets, what is the one thing that you think the market doesn't appreciate or where you think you are far from consensus?
That's a good question. Well, one topic that I like to think about is when a country will change their legal tender laws to adopt the Bitcoin standard, at least make it legal for paying bills, for paying taxes. And relatedly, when a central bank will purchase Bitcoin as part of the portfolio of reserves, right? So
in lieu of gold, in lieu of dollars, in lieu of...
Yeah, exactly. So legal tender laws allow Bitcoin and purchasing Bitcoin as a reserve asset. And I would guess that if we surveyed the audience today and we said, what's the probability that one or two of those things happen, legal tender or the reserve, in the next 10 years, I'm guessing, I don't know, about 50%, 50-50, whether in the next 10 years, one or two of those things happen. If you ask me what's the 50-50 point, at which point is it a 50% chance that one of those two things happen, I'd say 12 months. In the next 12 months, 50-50.
12 months.
Correct. 12 months. Now, it's 50-50, it's not 90-10, but it's not 2% either. So I acknowledge this is way off consensus.
Yeah, that's definitely not consensus.
No, and I can see it happening one of two ways, either offensively or defensively. So offensively, in the same way that Ed Carpenter today announced the IndyCar, it said, screw sponsors, we're going to have the Bitcoin community raise the money for the car. Very visionary, very forward-thinking, very pro-human freedom, very pro-human dignity. You could imagine a forward-thinking prime minister or president of a country who thinks the same way and says, I've done enough reading, I've done enough research, I get it, I get the importance of sound money for my people, particularly if it's a poor country, going back to my framing of poorer people have a higher percentage of their portfolio in cash versus wealthier people. So therefore, Bitcoin's more important for them. Countries that have a higher percentage of poor people, you can imagine a visionary, positive thinking, forward-thinking leader saying, this is just better for my people.
Yeah.
And a central bank saying, okay, we'll adopt some of that in our reserves. That would be offensive. Defensively would be out of desperation. So currency collapses, you know, Zimbabwe kind of in 08, 09, we've had lots and lots of true hyperinflations where the currency goes away in sort of an act of desperation. And by the way, if we watch closely Turkey and Venezuela and Iran and Pakistan, Zimbabwe, it might come up from the bottom. the use of Bitcoin. It's a misnomer that governments decide what money their people hold. It's a misnomer. Going back to the Darwinian propulsion comment I made, that most important decision of what you store your life force in, it goes beyond what a government official can tell you, which is why in these places where there's risk off, they're using Bitcoin. They don't care. It's illegal. They don't care. They need to live. Enough people had gold centuries ago that the general, the emperor, they said, guess we got to use gold. So you can imagine it coming from a bottoms up in a defensive way. So I'm 50-50. Legal tender laws in the next 12 months, or Bitcoin as a treasury, as a reserve asset in the central bank.
Well, next year at the Macrominds conference, we can see if that came true.
We'll flip the coin.
So I want to leave some time for questions, but there are a couple other things that I wanted to talk about before we move on to that. So layer 2 or second layer applications, right? So beyond the storage of value, now we're moving about use cases. And one of the things we've talked about and just scratch the surface is the lightning strike possibilities and uses of that. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that could disrupt financial transactions?
Yeah, I would start by saying that nothing beyond the store of value is necessary for Bitcoin to be extraordinarily valuable for the world. Okay. Having said that, for the first time in history, we have an electronic bearer asset. We've never had one of those before. It's called Bitcoin. And we have an open source monetary network. We've never had one of those before either. It's also called Bitcoin. That together can achieve cash finality, meaning final settlement, anywhere in the world, anytime, any day, 24/7, 365, liquidity in any currency pair you care about. So let me explain the mechanics. Think about like the base layer of cash. Think about US dollars or like the base layer. Like I can give it to you, you can give it to me. There's no other, that is the settlement, that is final settlement. But if I write you a check, that's a second layer solution, or credit card might be third layer solution. So there's more and more abstractions of money from the base layer of cash. Bitcoin, the asset, is the base layer. There's something called Lightning, which is a second layer solution. Think of it like a check. But it can move at light speed. And so an example of the mechanics are, I can today in New York turn my US dollars into Bitcoin. I can move them up to the Lightning Network. This is all in milliseconds. I can zip them anywhere in the world on Lightning Network at light speed. They are received that place in the world, and that place then can do an FX trade wherever it is, Bitcoin into dollars, if the receiver wants to receive dollars. So what's happened is you've moved fiat over Bitcoin rails. So it's a fiat to fiat transaction. You've done it instantly and for free, but for a tiny bit offer spread on the FX trades. There's no merchant fees. There's no interchange fees. There's no fees. There's no fees. It's a different set of rails. It's a totally new set of rails, instantly and for free.
And when can I use that?
So I'd say it's in, if Bitcoin itself is in the early innings, I'd say Lightning is like, Abner Doubleday still deciding how long the bases are going to be, like 60 feet, 65, 55. So it's like early design of basement, right? If Bitcoin's in the early innings, but like they're playing the game. They're playing the game. And a great example of this, and this is not a game, this is as serious as life and death, is what's going on right now in El Salvador. So Strike, you mentioned Strike, Jack Mahler's firm. It's an incredible firm. What they're allowing people from the US who want to give remittances to people in El Salvador, I don't know if you know this, but 24% of the GDP in El Salvador is remittances. Mexico's 4%, to put in perspective, 24% of the GDP is remittances.
It's coming back home, yeah.
The country depends on it, right? So a housekeeper in New York sends $100 to her sister in El Salvador. Before Strike and before Lightning, the way that transaction worked, it would go through Western Union. The sister would go to Western Union in El Salvador. The $100 would turn into 60. The sister would have to be fearful of gangs hanging outside the Western Union. And what a lot of people don't realize is there aren't that many Western Unions in El Salvador. So the sister might have to drive 3 to 5 hours on a bus each way to get to the Western Union, to risk her life, to get the 60, not 100, okay? Now fast forward to today. What has Strike done with Lightning Labs? That sister takes her $100 in a Strike app, buys Bitcoin. That Bitcoin zips to El Salvador across the Lightning Network. Her sister gets it in El Salvador, does that FX trade instantly and for free in seconds. So $100 doesn't turn into 60, $100 turns into $99.8. There's no trip to Western Union to battle the gangs. There's no 10 hours on a bus and taking that day out of your life every single week just to survive. And a couple, 6-8 weeks ago, there were 10, 15 signups a day. There's 15 to 20,000 signups a day. So they're playing baseball.
Wow.
They're playing baseball.
Yeah.
It is changing lives every single day. And the notes from the El Salvadorians of like, I cannot believe I'm getting $99.8. I can't believe I'm not having to battle gangs. I can't believe I'm having to take 10 hours on a bus. It's beyond life-changing. That is chapter 2 of Bitcoin. So chapter 1 is what we've been talking about, Bitcoin, the asset. Chapter 2, which we're in the very, very, not even early innings in, we're designing the bases, is Bitcoin, the network. But that's a real concrete example today.
Got it. So I'm going to start aggregating some. There's a ton of questions here. I'm looking at this list. I'm going to aggregate some of these and ask the question. But the first thing I'm going to ask is a lot of people here have grown up idolizing Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger.
Yeah, sure.
And they're two of the largest critics of Bitcoin, right? Some of these questions around this has been a bullish conversation. Let's talk about some of the downsides. But to quote them, Buffett said, probably a rat poison squared, not unsquared, squared.
Yeah.
And then disgusting and contrary to the interests of civilization. Now, they're not talking about you, they're talking about Bitcoin. So if you could talk to them, like, what would you ask them to consider?
At first, I'd say to you, I would not want to be judged by my worst moment, so I'm not going to judge them by theirs, right? The reality is Bitcoin just doesn't care what Warren Buffett thinks. It just doesn't care. Bitcoin doesn't care what Charlie Munger thinks. It doesn't care what Jamie Dimon thinks or Larry Fink thinks or Paul Craig. It just doesn't care. Bitcoin doesn't care what I think. It's much bigger than all of us. Buffett's rat poison comment is interesting. I wonder what Buffett would say if he was at dinner tonight in El Salvador with a family that didn't have to travel 10 hours on a bus, that got $99.8 instead of $100, that didn't have to risk their life against the gangs. And he was sitting across the table from them. And that was made possible because of Bitcoin. I wonder what Buffett would say at that dinner. Munger's comments, contrary to the interests of civilization, I find that also pretty interesting because there's various measures of a healthy society. One of the measures is the willingness to undertake long-term projects, particularly projects that will outlast our lives. So I know that you are into Scotland and Scottish soccer. Nick Carter is a great writer and thinker in Bitcoin, has an interesting framing about cathedrals. So think about a Scottish cathedral, one that was built 800 years ago, so maybe around 1300. It took 150 years to build. And let's say we go back in time and you and I are masons and laborers putting those final stones at the top of that 150-year project. One thing we know, our fathers worked on the project, our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers, our great-great-grandfathers, and our great-great-great-grandfathers. What that whole lineage had in common is one thing. They knew for sure they would not see the project to its fruition. They would die before it was complete. Yet, they whistled to work every day because they thought they were working on something bigger than themselves. What were they working on? They were working on an 80-foot cathedral. They were working on an experience that when a peasant comes in from the countryside, who's never seen man make anything taller than 6 or 8 feet and stands at 80 feet, and he sees something in the corner that he just slack-jawed, which is light that's got colors, stained glass, and he's just in awe and cannot speak. Now, that was built to the glory of God. Bitcoiners believe in a better monetary world. We're the Masons, we're the laborers of today, and we're working on a new monetary cathedral, a new monetary cathedral. And just like our great-great-grandfathers in that example, A2, we will never see the fruits of our labor in its full form. We are building the base layer, the initial stones of the Bitcoin cathedral. We are working on something bigger than ourselves. We are working on sound money for humanity. That's what we're working on. Rat poison, contrary to the interests of civilization, what I would say to that is I don't care, because I don't. Because I'm over here working on what I'm working on, building that base layer of that monetary cathedral.
Interesting. So a couple more questions that we have time for. I think we have another 5-10 minutes or so. So what keeps you up at night in terms of what could go wrong in Bitcoin? And a follow-up to that is, do you have concerns about taxes on crypto?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there'll be enormous government coordinated attacks on Bitcoin. I think we ain't seen nothing yet. So I think we just need to be prepared for that.
And they'll go through taxes, through
making things illegal, through making transfers harder and harder. That's not an if, that's a when. There's just no doubt. There's no doubt. The reality is Bitcoin, if you really think about like what it is, it's just a password to a private key. And you can use custodial solutions, but you can also store that password through phrase memorization in your brain. So you're from St. Louis, you could say, my name is Andrew, I grew up in St. Louis, I like the Cardinals. That could be worth $1 billion. You can cross borders with that phrase, worth $1 billion. We've had black markets in gold, we've had black markets in lots of things, and the government has been able to shut those down from time to time. We've never had a black market in passphrase memorization. It's hard to point a gun at an idea.
Right. True. And don't tell people my password. How could you get interest paid in Bitcoin to all holders in a fixed supply world?
So it's just a matter of trading in the open market. And as long as people are willing to sell their Bitcoin, and they're always that people are, it's widely distributed. It's just like trading any other liquid good. And Bitcoin is very, very liquid. So it's a sort of a cognitive mistake to think that because Bitcoin is a fixed supply, doesn't mean it's not a liquid asset. Those are two different concepts. That's conflating two different concepts. Fixed supply and liquidity, those are not related concepts.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So you would just, if you wanted to
go to the market.
pay interest, go to the market, get
Bitcoin.
some, and then
that's right.
Give that as interest.
That's not what we would do. That's what we do. That's how it works.
Got it.
Yep. So interest gets due. We do an API call. We do an FX trade. Dollars go out. Bitcoin comes in. Bitcoin is trading many billions of dollars a day. Bitcoin futures are trading many billions of dollars a day. Bitcoin options are trading many. The market is extraordinarily liquid.
So I think last question, Dean, unless you have any more, but what motivates you the most going forward? You know, we've talked a lot about how you got here, and there's a lot of excitement. But what pumps you up for the future?
I mean, it's really built around financial inclusion and economic empowerment. That's really what it is. It really goes back to that framing of the percentage of your portfolio that's cash. If that's high, I want to help you. That's very motivating. We're helping everybody, but for people whose percentage of portfolio of cash is high, that's who we're helping through education, through making it easier, not hard, to Bitcoin. We're going to be unleashing a torrent of support, basically for people who have a high percentage of their portfolio in cash because they're poor. We're helping all people, but that is extremely motivating. One of the most interesting things, you mentioned our partners in the beginning of this, FIS, Morgan Stanley, New York Life, Mass Mutual, Liberty Mutual. You're right, not small firms, not great firms, great firms, iconic American firms. I've asked every one of those firms to join us in waiving our fees. And we're dealing with the poorest members of society, batting 1,000. That gets me out of bed in the morning.
Wow.
How do we get Bitcoin in the hands of as many people who are poor, who have a high percentage of their portfolio in cash as possible, as quickly as possible, to escape the fiat flood? Bitcoin is an ark. It's an ark to protect us against the fiat flood, and it is raining outside. It is pouring. And people who have assets don't need the protection as much. They did nothing wrong to get those assets. They did nothing wrong that's being inflated. Nothing at all. It's not about against that. It's for these people. These people also did nothing wrong. Yet the one thing they own, which is cash, is being debased in front of their very eyes. Let's get them out of the fiat. Let's get them into the ark. This ark of encrypted energy, this ark that is Bitcoin. That is what motivates me. That's what you'll see me working on.
Yeah, I can hear and feel how deeply personal this is.
Very personal.
And it's the why.
I feel so grateful that I had this opportunity. I feel so grateful that I found my way into this field and be able to pull all these different resources together. We get to choose how we spend our time. We all do. Who we spend it with, how we spend it. And I've seen this opportunity to take all the things that we've been able to build at Stonebridge with my colleagues, with my partners. This is by no means, everybody together is aligned on this mission. What could be more important? And think about the end result. Think about that cathedral. Not even in our lifetimes in the future. It is incredible to working on a project that you know the end result you won't even get to see. That is powerful.
What a purpose. And with that, I'm going to conclude today's conversation with Ross. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Great to chat with you.